Alright, let's start. Welcome everyone. I've never seen so many people here, so this is great. Welcome to this lunchtime talk. Before we begin, I would like to, on behalf of Maritime Museum Tasmania, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Palawa of Nipaluna Hobart. We pay our respects to elders, past and present, and recognize their continuing connection to land, to waters, and community across Lutruwita, Tasmania. And it's a pleasure today to introduce Peter Marmion. Peter is a seasoned wilderness guide. He's a passionate Tasmanian, very popular as we've noticed. And he's also an environmental champion. When he's not guiding in some of the most remote part of the island, he volunteers on nature conservation projects across many of Tasmania's offshore islands, tackling feral animal control and weed eradication to protect fragile ecosystems. Peter is also a photographer and an author. His recent book, Hidden Worlds, is a rich written and photographic portrait drawn from 50 years of experience, research and adventure in the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area. Today, Peter will share his love of Tasmania's rugged coastline and his story of circumnavigating the state on foot. Please join me in welcoming Peter Marmion.
Thanks very much. And it is a real honour to be able to talk here today, and thanks so much for everyone coming along. It's I hope I don't forget what I was going to talk about if we get stage struck. I've always admired the Maritime Museum and what it's done for Tasmania, and we might have to do the talk again. It is going to be recorded though, and there'll be a link available, so if you're standing outside and you can't hear me or see the photos, then that will be available. So, on with the show. When I retired from full-time teaching, I had a very late middle-age crisis and thought it'd be a good idea to walk right around the coast of Tasmania. Some people buy Harley Davidsons or Porsches. That was what I did. And I've just finished it recently, and I'm writing a book about that now, which is mainly about all the people that I met along the way and the stories that I collected. And I'll hopefully tell you some of those today. And most of what I'm talking about today is on the west coast of Tasmania between Port Davey and Strahan, and particularly there'll be photographs of the south coast and so forth and the west coast, but particularly the piece between Low Rocky Point and Point Hibbs, which was the part of the walk that I didn't know whether I'd be able to achieve it or not, because that area is totally untracked. You feel like you're the only person who's ever walked there, and it is extremely difficult walking a lot of the time. And the only reason that I was able to complete it was because of a fellow called Ian Johnson, who many of you will be familiar with. I'd helped him with his books, The Shank, the Anchorage Guide to Southwest Tasmania, and he said, well, I'll help you now, and we'll get this walk done. So he'd drop me and companions off, and we'd walk for 3 or 4 days, and then he'd go up the coast and wait for us to turn up, so we'd get dropped off, say, at Low Rocky Point, and then he'd go up to the main Waring River, and we'd arrive there 3 or 4 days later, and we did those expeditions on 3 occasions. And I'm really indebted to Ian, because his boat, the Julienne, is just perfect for that type of expedition, and his seamanship skills are second to none. So we'll get on with the photos. And this is the first trip we did like this, and this is Ian, who I've just talked about on the left. Annie Ford, this is typical Tasmanian, and I know there's lots of my friends here today, but Annie, I taught her when she was in grade 6 at Signet Primary School, and then she turned up again with Ian on this expedition. And Baxter Maywood, he was the best mountain bike rider in Tasmania at the time, and the old sea dog on the end's me with the grey beard. So, and Annie's actually set a world record for both men and women for downhill mountain bike riding. It's in the Guinness Book of Records. And she's recently done it again only a few months ago and smashed the record. She did it in New Zealand. She's quite an amazing character. She's riding around Europe at the moment, raising funds for campaigning against global warming. She's an amazing person. And this is Ian. He doesn't often look like this, but I don't like to say he was scared, but he was alert and interested. And this is going into the mouth of the Mainwaring River. I always pronounced it Mannering, but the fishermen call it Mainwaring, so I should stick to that. And it was quite a swelly day. There was probably a 2 or 3 metre swell running, and that was a good thing because the mouth of the Mainwaring is full of, the reefs everywhere, and when there's a swell running you can actually see where they are. When it's really flat calm it's more dangerous. And you might just be able to make out a rock right in the background there. That's called Acacia Rock, and it's named after a boat that was wrecked there in 1904. It was taking timber from Port Esperance to Adelaide, and the lighthouse keepers at Matsaka Island saw it go past, and it was in June, so often not great weather, and the lighthouse keepers described the weather as ugly, and ugly it probably was because it's thought that she hit that rock or a rock nearby and was a total wreck. And they set out search parties for her, and they came down from Strahan, down the west coast, and they got to the Mainwaring River, and they couldn't cross because the river was in flood. So, and little did they know that just 1 mile south of the Mainwaring River was all the wreckage of the Acacia. She must have been wrecked very close to the coast, and it was concentrated in this very short section of coastline. There were 9 crew, and they found 5 skeletons later on when they were searching for the Briar-Holm people just only a few months later. There's so many great wreck stories, so I won't be able to tell many of them today, but if you want a really ripping yarn, the Varna, which was in 1857, is a fantastic yarn. I'll see how I go for time, I might have time to tell it. And when you're with Ian, you live off the sea, and isn't it a great good news story that bluefin tuna numbers have surged back? It's like humpback whales. We hear so many bad news stories, so it's good to share some good news ones. But a little tuna like that was probably only about 20 pounds, but it fed us for days and days. You eat a lot of abalone and crayfish when you're with Ian too. Robin says I shouldn't leave this photo in, but anyway, I asked permission. And this is a couple of lovely crew members having a shower at the waterfall at Port Davey. And you can pull your boat right alongside there. It's about 4 metres deep, and just tie up, and the flow of the water never changes. It must be fed by a spring or something. And the water is absolutely beautiful. In fact, Danny King said if you drink the water, the buttongrass water, you'll always return. Danny's daughter Janet reckons I must have had a huge dose. And when you go along the south coast, there aren't many really good anchorages, but this is one of them. It's called Louisa Bay, and it's a renowned place for crayfishermen to stop in there, abalone divers as well. Beautiful forest right down to the shore. It's always a little bit swelly in there, but you can usually get out of, well, you get out of norwesterly, westerly, and if you're lucky, southwesterly if it's not too strong. And Ian said to me, I'm going to take you somewhere where you've never been at Port Davey. And rather arrogantly I said, I don't think that's possible because I've been going there for 53 years. And he was right though, and he took us between the 2 needles. There'd be lots of people here who know those rocks, the pyramids, not the needles. There's lots of needles around Tasmania, but Yeah, and so first of all, there was so much white water that his huge propeller didn't grip the water. So for a while it wasn't, we were a little bit worried about it, and then away it went. And it did allow me to get this photograph, which is Sugarloaf Rock, with one of the thank you, in the foreground there. And often when you're going along the south coast, you see these amazing light shows. We call them God's rods. And this was a pretty typical day, about a 3 metre swell. Lots of islands off the south coast, and I'll talk a little bit about them as we go along because I've got some photos of some of my favourite ones. This is a place called Amy Boat Harbour, and the day that we were there, on one of the expeditions, it was blowing 50 knots, but in this tiny little niche in the cliff line, this is near New Harbour, you could get out of that wind, and it was fantastic. So it was lifting the water in huge sheets all around us just outside the bay. And while I was there, I had the best ever review of my book, because some of you will know that I was a teacher and principal for a long time, and I was teaching literacy, and this guy who fishes by himself came up alongside us. I don't know how he knew it was me, because I had all my wet weather gear on and my hood on and sunglasses, and he said, "Are you Peter Marmion?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah I am." And he said, "Bought your book for my dad? It's the only book he's read cover to cover. Good on you." And this is one of my favourite anchorages down there. This is called Ketchum. Ketchum Island's on the right there, and it's quite shallow, so you don't go in there when it's too swelly because you might be sitting on the bottom between waves. But on calm days, it's an absolutely mind-blowing place to be. And I always tell people that you might go to a quiz show one night and someone will ask the question, what's the only north-facing beach on the south coast? And it's a beach on Ketchum Island here, so I hope that helps you out sometime. And this is one of the rocks and islands in the Matsika group. It's quite close to Mat. This is Flat Top, and Flat Top actually has tunnels right through it. And Pete's here. We often talk about one day it's going to be calm enough that we can drive a boat through there. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure it will. And all these islands are really important places for seabird breeding. So this island on the top of it has hundreds and hundreds of fairy prions breed there, common diving petrels, and any of the islands and rocks that have soil on them also have short-tailed shearwaters and sometimes sooty shearwaters, but of course short-tailed shearwaters is what most people call mutton birds, by far the most common in our waters. And also around this rock there's always a lot of fur seals. And this is a photograph of Alone's Gulch at Matsika Island. It's really the only easy place to land on the island, and a lot of the time that's not easy either. There used to be a jetty where that structure is just down on the bottom left there, but the jetty has been washed away by storms, because in really extreme weather the waves will come right around both sides of the island, and it's not good to be there when that happens. And the island in the background is Flatwitch Island, which is there are 800,000 breeding pairs of short-tailed shearwaters on that island. The numbers are just so huge. We're just so lucky in Tasmania to have this diverse wildlife. It's one of the big thrills to me about being a Tasmanian. And about 7 or 8 years ago, there was a fishing boat with 3 blokes from the Huon had engine failure, and they had it up way up the west coast off Windowpane Bay, and somehow they drifted on the current, and the forecast was shocking, and it did indeed become terrible, like 70 knot winds, huge seas, and the police boat went around and got to them just before the boat smashed onto that island. And I hope all those police officers received bravery medals because it was an extraordinary act of seamanship. The boat was called the Jensenette. And this is Ian's beautiful little boat anchored in the cove. Whenever we go past there, we think that the volunteers do such a fantastic job that when the weather's all right, we stop in there and give them fresh food, like if we've caught fish or if we have vegetables or fruit or whatever, sometimes red wine. Well, one time we went there and there was a sign that said, COVID, proceed no further. And we thought it was just really bizarre to see this sign out in the middle of this, well, to me it's like a sub-Antarctic island. And so we called up the volunteers and said, oh, we've got all this fresh food, but there's this sign here, what do you want us to do? And they said, come on up. So we just didn't let the Parks and Wildlife Service know. And we went away for a week and no one was coughing and spluttering, so we figured we were safe. But usually all around this gulch there's fur seals as well, and sometimes even elephant seals. And there has been some breeding records of elephant seals, because the seal population in Bass Strait was just decimated by sealing in the late 18th and early 19th century, and we did have lots of elephant seals in Bass Strait, but they all disappeared. Apparently we also had sea lions, which I find interesting, and New Zealand fur seals, which are now called long-nosed fur seals, and Australian fur seals, but all the populations were just decimated. And certainly with the elephant seal, we're starting to get some records from around the coast and even some breeding records, so that's pretty exciting. Also, when you go into this gulch, you often see bits of seal, which again keeps you very alert and interested when you're rowing a little boat like that, because it means wherever there are fur seals in Tasmania, there's a chance that there are white sharks. They're just called white sharks now, unfortunately. I like great white sharks. And I have had some terrific encounters with white sharks in this area, but I might tell you them another day. This is getting ashore to Matsyka. It's not easy, you've got to just judge you're getting off between the swells, making sure you don't smash your dinghy at the same time. This is one of the fur seals. You've got to be especially careful around seal colonies around November when they're giving birth, because the young seals have to learn how to swim. So if you go in there too fast, or you should just stay away in November and December, because you can stampede them and they can get crushed or drowned. So if you're a boatie, please be careful around seals in November and December. And all the time that you're on the south coast, the views are just awe-inspiring. And this is the end of DeWitt Island, the largest island in the Matsyka group. Havelock Bluff, and then the mountains in the distance are Precipitous Bluff on the left, and Mount Victoria Cross and Mount Wiley, and there's several other mountains in that area that have the names of Victoria Cross winners, and Australians have won 101 Victoria Crosses, and 14 of them have been won by Tasmanians. I don't know what that says about us, but whether we're more mad or more brave, I don't know. And several of them have been won by people from the Huon Valley. So there's Mount Bisty, you can't see, is over the back there. And in the 1970s, Precipitous Bluff, I had plans to mine it for limestone. Thank goodness that didn't go ahead. And now, of course, it's all World Heritage Area. And this is the lighthouse on Matsyka Island that was built in 1891. It's a beautiful place. And these are the needle rocks leading away from them. And Matsyka is one of the windiest places in Australia. It has recorded a gust of 208 kilometres an hour. But it's the consistency of the wind that's the amazing thing, because, it's called wind run. and it's measured by an anemometer. And like Hobart has an average daily wind run of around 330 kilometres, and we're a reasonably windy city. Matsika's average daily wind run is 830, but it has recorded days of over 2,000 kilometres of wind run. It's just staggering. So you're not only looking out for the gusts, but you know there's a lot more coming. Luckily, forecasting's so good now that it really helps. And this is a scene once on one of the trips around with Ian where the entire mainland of Tasmania was covered by this gigantic electric storm, and we were just skirting down around the bottom of it, and luckily it never got any closer. Because you become very aware of your masts when you're at sea in an electrical storm. This is looking inshore towards Cox Bluff. And then you go around the fantastic Cape, Southwest Cape. It's actually made of granite, where most of southwest Tasmania is quartzite. And I was lucky enough to know Danny King a bit, and we were talking one day. He just got back from going down to Cape Horn, and he'd flown down over it, and I've been there since myself by boat. And he said to me, Cape Horn can't be as windy as they make out because it's got trees on it. There are no trees on Southwest Cape. In fact, when you do get out on the Cape, the tallest tree is about that tall. And then it'll often just run along, showing you the direction from what the wind's been blowing. And this is the Cape, as you see it from about 15 nautical miles to the north. Always puts me in mind of a sleeping dinosaur. And this is moving up towards the entrance to Port Davey. And you can just see between the two rocks, that's the big Caroline rock. And once you go north of that, you're pretty much home and hose. It's a nice feeling often when you've been out on the Southern Ocean. And this is Sugarloaf Rock, and it's made of this beautiful contorted and twisted quartzite rock. This photograph always puts me in mind of an elephant or a woolly mammoth. And the eyes there about halfway up the cliff. But you can see that amazing contorted shape of the rocks. And these are some of the oldest rocks on Earth. They're somewhere between 700 million and 1.3 billion years old. And that's more than a quarter of the age of the Earth. And often you're treated to... The walking is horrendous often, but you've got these distractions like this enormous surf. And this is up north of High Rocky Point, this area just south of Point Hibbs, and this would have been a 7 or 8 metre sea running that day. We were glad we were on land. It was really, really spectacular. And this is called Endeavour Beach, and it's in that same place. And I think this must be Tasmania's most remote beach. It's a long, long way from anywhere. And Dan and I got up one end of it, and I said to him, we're not going to see anybody on this beautiful beach. And as soon as I'd said it, some people walked out from this end. There were about 5 of them, and they walked up the beach, and I knew 2 of them. And they were people who were there doing the sprats, the weeding for the euphorbia that's so invasive. And they were having to walk, once they'd done the weeding, then they were going to walk all the way up and get picked up at Macquarie Harbour. It's fantastic what volunteers do in Tasmania. It's actually, it's called Endeavour Beach. I thought it was called that after Cook's ship, but it's named after a Tasmanian government fisheries vessel which went down to Macquarie Island in 1914 to swap over the observers and to take more supplies down. And there were a crew of about 20, and they got down to Macquarie Island okay, but on the way back something happened. No one knows what it was, but the ship never returned, and the New Zealand government mounted a search in there around their coastline, and there were searches around this area here, and maybe That's where it got its name from, but it's a very sad tale. And this is when I was with Ian, and we were up near a place called the Urquhart River, and Ian's really keen to get in there one day, and I said, I don't think today's the day, Ian. And as we came up along here, I was thinking, I hope this engine keeps going. We're going to be having a good day whenever I can hear that engine throbbing. But when you look on the back of that, if we'd had to swim through that, well, it wasn't going to be fantastic. And this is up near Point Hibbs, and there's actually a seal colony forming up there now, which is good. Some of these places that we're seeing new seal haul-outs developing, which is a really happy thing. Quite a big swell you can see running here too. And I should just quickly tell you about Nirvana. In 1857, she set out from Greenock in Scotland, and on the way near the Kerguelen Islands, the captain died, and he'd been sick for about a week, and he was the only one on board who could navigate. So they didn't know where they were, they just kept heading east, and they came across an American whaler, and they asked them, where are we? And can we borrow one of your crew who can navigate? But the whaler didn't want to give up any of the crew, but they told them where they were. And then not long after that, they sighted the west coast of Tasmania, and just near Point Hibbs. And they dithered about off there for a while. They put the ship's boat out to try and find a harbour, because, as you know, there are not too many harbours around that part of the world. And then they thought, oh, well, we better try and get out of it. But of course, a storm blew up, and the Varna went on the beach north of Point Hibbs and was a total wreck. And the story of the survival after that would take me about 5 minutes, but I won't say it. But go and look it up, it's incredible. And many of you would have, well, all of you would have heard of Low Rocky Point, because it's always on our weather forecasts, and this is Low Rocky Point, very aptly named. And the lighthouse on it is actually about another half a kilometre up to the left. So if you're going past there, you've got to give it a very wide berth. It's a specking place to be, though. And this is Hibbs Pyramid, which you can see for a long way up and down the coast. And interesting, I was only reading about this last night, this is actually dolerite, where most of the dolerites in central and southeastern Tasmania, but this is an outcrop of it. And this is a really important place for shearwaters to nest. I've never climbed on that island, because I'm always there when shearwaters are around, so it's not a good idea, but maybe one day in winter I'll go and climb it. And this is one of the better anchorages. That, as you can see, 2 fishing boats there hiding behind the island, and in that direction there's nothing until Patagonia. So it's one of the longest ocean fetches in the world. So it generates these huge swells. Some of them have had their genesis in the South Atlantic Ocean. And there have been waves that have been measured at 20 metres by the wave rider Boyd off Strahan. There was one that was 23 metres, but the bungee cord that anchors it broke, and that wasn't an official record. So, but last winter there was a one of 17 metres, so it's huge. And this is the anchorage on the southern side of Low Rocky Point, Cockle Beach, looking down towards Port Davey. And this is one of the few reasonable places that you can anchor there. You can see the boat on the right there has its outriggers out. It's helped to steady it in a swell. I've fished on boats with those and they don't steady you much. One of the joys of walking on this coastline in summer is all the amazing plant life, and this is a sun orchid. And this area that we walked just right near Low Rocky Point was just a huge meadow of sun orchids, unbelievably beautiful. And it had been recently burnt, so it would have been part of its cycle, I suppose. And this is, of course, pigface, which was an important food for the Aboriginal people. And I'll talk a little bit about the Aboriginal people as we go along through these photos. On the way Sadly, we found huge amounts of debris from international sources, but also a lot from our own fishing industry. And this is from the aquaculture industry. This would have come from Macquarie Harbour, this huge piece of plastic pipe. If you hit that with your boat at speed, it would be very serious. And Dan Bruin is holding it up so I can photograph it there to give scale to it. And he was really appalled by the amount of rubbish, and he went to see the aquaculture people and said, well, you know, we just walked this coast, and every metre that we walked when we were right on the coast, there was plastics, and you should do something about it. And to their credit, they have done something about it, and they are doing regular beach cleanups now, but of course that coast, it's really difficult to get onto it a lot of the time because of the swell. And this is a typical place where we camped on the walk up the west coast, try and hunker down behind some vegetation. Water was never a problem. You come across the creek every 5 minutes. It's just incredibly well watered, that coastline. But trying to find some open space is a different matter. And one of the most spectacular rivers that flow onto the west coast is the Lewis River. And very, very few people have the opportunity to go into the Lewis. And the reason is because it's guarded by all those reefs just out there. And you actually have to come really close to this right-hand rock to make the entrance. And once you're into the river, it's really beautiful and quite deep and magnificent place, very lonely. And you go up the river about a kilometre maybe, and you can't hear the sea because it's around the big bend, and all you can hear is bird sound. And everywhere we went on the coast was amazing geology, and I was often too worn out to get my camera out to take the photos, so this is a rare shot. I've somehow found the energy to get it out. And this is at the Lewis River again. We knew Ian was in there, but we couldn't see him, and he was up around the bend. And we communicate with him via VHF radio, so it was really good that he knew we were going okay and we knew he was going okay. Not that we could do much to help him, but anyway. And then he came ashore, picked us up, took us out to Julienne. We had a shower, and he made us a fresh crayfish roll, and then they dropped us on the other side of the river and we kept walking north. And we were very nervous about them going out, and that's Andy standing on the cabin top roof looking out for any stray rocks. And yeah, we watched them go out there because at least we had a meat herd and we had some food, but they got out all right, and it was a great relief seeing they were doing it for us. And this is the mainwear in Anchorage, and it can be quite swelly there, but this day it wasn't. And we actually saw, every time I've been there, I've seen Tasmanian devils out during the day, and it's an indication of how many that there are there, because the competition for food's so great that they're hunting in the daytime, because the terrible facial tumour disease hasn't reached there, thank goodness. And this is further up the Mainwearing River. Ian has these beautiful canoes, and we paddled up until we met huge log jams and could go no further, but it's fantastic. And at Nye Bay, we stopped for a bit of R&R. There are huge sand dunes there, and Annie and Dan did some spectacular jumping down them. The thing that amazes me about this photograph is how Dan's kept his hat on. He must be able to flex those head muscles. And this is at Nye Bay. We often had, because we went when the weather was forecast was good, of course, we often had these beautiful nights where totally still, and that's just the open ocean out there, but it was a very relaxing night. And the whole time that I've been walking on the west coast, I'm so aware of the Tasmanian Aboriginal culture, and sometimes we've come across things that were quite unexpected. I've been a great student of Robinson's diaries that have been edited by Plomley. But Robinson often has things slightly out of place. I think he didn't write his diary every day. He might have done it sometimes every second or third day. So we'd sometimes come across village sites, not where we thought we might find them. And this is a petroglyph carved onto a rock in the middle of a creek. And it has 6 toes. And my son's just returned from a trip up into the Northern Territory walking. And the guide there said that the 6 toes there is an indication of that is a spirit. And I wondered if it's the same thing here in Tasmania. And this is Annie at the shank, like the Ketchum Island that I was raving about before is a brilliant anchorage, but this is probably the best anchorage of them all. Because there's a whole series of reefs and rocks and islets, and you weave your way in, and then you come into this beautiful anchorage, and this is all a beautiful white sand beach here that you can step ashore on. So the swell's all been quelled by the ocean, by all those rocks. And this was a place where I wanted to camp because it was the only place that wasn't completely covered in vegetation, and there just happened to be 3 huge tiger snakes there. Thought it was a good place as well to sun themselves. But the really lucky thing up there, the tiger snakes are really docile, so I just sort of gently herded them off the spot and put my tent up, and it was a lovely place on a marsupial lawn. This is a photo of a very happy, healthy devil, and next to it, that is a dead seal. So the devil knows he's got food for another month there, at least. And you have to be really careful when you're walking on the west coast that you don't leave your boots outside. You've got to put them in the tent because these fellas will come and steal them. And there's a story that happened last year on the west coast where a young woman was walking from Macquarie Harbour to Port Davey. She was alone and she had 30 days food supply with her. Most I've ever carried is about 12. I don't know how you carry 30. But she was way down the coast near the Urquhart River that I mentioned earlier, and she left her boots out and the devil stole them. And so she was stuck on this coast with this super sharp rock, quartzite rock that just cut you to pieces, with no boots. But luckily she had one of those little locators that allows you to also send really short messages. So she sent a message to her mum in Queensland to say, lost boots, help. So her mum rang a bloke in Strahan who's taken me on a few expeditions and dropped me off. Sam Garrity, he's a terrific bloke, and like lots of West Coasters do anything to help you. So he got the size from her mum, and it was size 7. So he just asked around on the Bush Telegraph, does anyone have a pair of size 7 boots in Strahan? And someone actually had a pair of brand new, never been used size 7 scarpers. So he ran around there, grabbed them. The forecast was for the weather to really break up that night. So he dashed down the coast in his shark cat, anchored off the Urquhart River where there's no proper anchorage at all. And he said I was talking to him just yesterday actually, he said the swell was about 3 or 4 metres, so pretty big. And they anchored there and she swam out to the boat, had a couple of beers with them, and then put the boots into a plastic bag and with lots of air and sealed them as best they could, and then she swam in and away she went. And I met her about 3 weeks later down at Melaleuca and she'd done it. Yeah. And I lost a glove once to a devil, and you need scrub gloves because of cutting grass, and I'd lost one. I was careless, left it out to dry at night, and the devil got it. And we were just north of the Wandra River, and I passed about, I estimate, 1 trillion trip hazards on the way because of no track, and then I rocketed just before we got to the beach into the super sharpest cutting grass you've ever seen, because sometimes it's sharper than others. Whether it's on the health of the plant, I don't know. And I came out and I was bleeding from a scowl and from, still got the scars all up here, and I stumbled out onto the beach, and Ian looked at me because he rode in with the dinghy to pick us up, and he said, "It's been a tough trip, Dan." I know there's a concert on, and it's a very civilised thing to go to a concert, so we mustn't run over time.
No, you have 10
Right, we'll go quickly. This is another Dan, and I've known this Dan since he was inside his mum, because I taught him at Franklin Primary School. And this is just a bit typical of the country around High Rocky Point. Some quite good going, but every now and again we'd get onto cliffy bits like this, and we didn't know whether we could get off at the end or not. And sometimes we'd have to retrace our steps and go into the scrub, which we were always trying to avoid because it's terrible going in that scrub. In fact, I'm often reminded of when we were going up this really steep and incline, well, nearly a cliff really, and it was completely covered in vegetation, and we knew that there was, on one side of us there was a gulch and another side of the gulch, and there was about 100-foot fall into both of them. And I said to Dan, we're going to have to be careful here that we just don't scrub bash out into mid-air. And I often think of that story of the old timers. If the scrub was thick, they'd describe it as being so thick that the dogs had to go out to bark. We got into a lot of that territory. This is up near High Rocky Point, the bull kelp. This is the Montgomery Rocks off High Rocky, which is home to seabirds again, and also seals. And this is an Aboriginal village site. And you can see here there's about 5. Annie's sitting in front of them, and there's one over there, there's one close to me, one behind her. We wondered whether they were all interconnected. And these huts that they built could hold up to 12 people. And wherever I've come across them on my walking, they're always in these most beautiful places. And they, like here, this is a really safe place for people to be able, the women, to be able to catch abalone and crayfish and so forth. And also for the young children to be able to learn to swim, whereas out beyond there it's very rough. But when you find these places, it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It's just so extraordinary. And whenever I've found Tasmanian Aboriginal places like this, everyone stops talking. No one makes a decision about it, but everyone just falls silent. It's an amazing reaction. This is further up the coast at Sloop Point. This is one day here, we walked all day for about 12 hours and we covered about 3 kilometres. But it's very beautiful and very wild. And this was easy going, easier. We got onto these big shingles. They were very slippery, but at least we weren't in the scrub. This is at a place called Gorge Point. This sunset went on for hours. And this is outside the World Heritage Area, so we could actually have a fire, which was nice because we were very cold and wet. And everywhere you stood was jack jumpers. So we had to get the tents up and make sure the zips were as close as they could be, and be very careful and quick getting in and out of the tents. And then this is up, a lot of you will recognise this place, Ocean Beach at Strahan. Tasmania's longest beach, it's over 30 kilometres long. And then we're heading home. This night we had a forecast that it was going to be bad, so we were going for it to get round Southwest Cape before the bad weather came, but it never came until about midday the next day, and the Southern Ocean was like a lake. And we thought we'd enjoy a glass of red. And Meg's here. Yeah, lovely to have you here, Meg. She came with me on this trip. It was a nice glass of red, wasn't it?
It was.
And that's it. We turn the light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone just...
And if
Thank you.
I know that this concert's on, so I don't want to hold you up, but if anyone's got a question, I'll try and answer
Yes,
it.
we might have
Yeah.
a couple of minutes for a couple of questions, but we have until 1, so... Go for it. Another question. And thanks so much. So inspiring.
Well, it's a pleasure.
So beautiful.
So lovely to have such a crowd.
It's not yet a really dumb question. All of the places you named, how did you know where you were?
Yeah, I was really lucky. Like, Tasmania must be one of the best mapped islands on Earth. So the map is amazing, and I use LIST a lot. Anyone can get onto it. You just Google LIST, and you can zoom in and out on these fantastic maps. So we had those, and we also had I had a bloke who's walked that coast many times. He's been the bloke who started the sprats, the weeding of the euphorbia, Jonathan Marsden Smedley, and he put on the maps campsites and where there might be tracks, although we very rarely ever found them. You could never. Everywhere we went, it looked like no one had ever been before. They must just grow over so quickly. But it is really important to know exactly where you are all the time. On one of the worst bits, we went in one afternoon. We went up over the little plateau behind the coast, and we went only about 2 kilometres, but it took us 6 hours. And we were rotating the scrub bashing lead, and we were so tired that we actually came across this huge tree, and first of all I thought that it was a myrtle, but it was actually a celery top pine, and I'd never seen one so big. Luckily Dan said, "Oh, look at this tree, this is actually a celery top pine," but it was enormous. I did Google, put a spot down so if anyone wanted to go back and find it they could, but it's the biggest one I've ever seen.
So you had printed maps?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and laminated so they don't get wet. Yeah, but they were really high scale too, so we could make out every little bump, and because that's what you need. You need everything going for you, really.
Yeah.
And we were really lucky too, because a lot of the time we were doing the walk, it was low swell and low tides during the day. Because if you were there when it was stormy and high tides, you'd be really stuck. You could be there for much, much longer than you expect to be there. And because going into the scrub, well, you can always keep going, but it's going to be hellishly slow.
How long did that take you to get up to
I'd done lots of walking up and down the coast from Port Davey to Low Rocky Point looking for orange-bellied parrots over the years. No worries. But the bit between Low Rocky Point and Point Hibbs, that hardest piece, that took us 10 days. Yeah.
Pretty easy to swim with.
Yeah. But Pete and I work together, and we're often looking on a boat, and I'll often say, "I've walked this bit," and Pete says, "I've swum this bit." Peter's swum around Tasmania. I've walked around. It's a great island, isn't it? There's challenges for everyone here.
Do we have any more questions? Where to now?
Yeah, I did start out trying to climb all the mountains, but I'm sort of happy with what I've done with that now, really. And I've got a boat of my own that I almost never use. So